Welcome to Mediocre Gaming, and today we're playing Destiny 2. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salutations. Today, everything you needed to know about Armor 2.0. Let's get to it. So Armor 2.0 has been out for a few months now, and in order to really appreciate what has been going on, we really need to look at how it started and looking at Armor 1.0. Armor 1.0 didn't have any mods. All it had were either mobility, recovery, and resilience on a 10-point scale, and that was it. So once you got one piece of armor, that was really all you needed, assuming it had mobility or resilience or recovery or whatever you were looking for. Now they updated that, 1.5, I guess you would say, and then that put in different perks on it. So like the enhanced sniper targeting or unflinching shotgun aim, you get the idea. So looking at 2.0, it was supposed to open up the possibility of being able to do different things with your armor and customize it more to your style. And then you could have, one set of armor that you use for pinnacle activities like nightfalls or raids. And then you could have another set that you would use for, say, Crucible. And then, another set for, Gambit. In theory, that was really good. In practice, there are still a lot of problems with armor. And that's a whole nother video, so we'll hold off on that until then. Looking at the old armor, you could have resilience, you could have recovery, and then there was also a base amount of mobility, resilience, and recovery. And like I said, that was on a 10-point scale instead of a 100-point scale. And then in addition to that, we have things like, sniper reserves, heavy ammo finder, scout rifle targeting, ashes to assets, remote connection, and depending on the piece that you had, would determine what perks could be on those pieces. So arm piece had loader, also had scavenger and heavy ammo finder. Chest piece had special ammo finder, reserves. It also had unflinching, which is very similar to Armor 2.0 now. Boots had finder and dexterity or traction. And then your class item, it also had ammo finder, scavenger, and then things like recuperation, better already, insulation, innervation. So you can see some of the changes that were made and where they came from. And then, of course, how things used to be. Looking at masterworking, the Armor 1.5, you got extra solar resistance or you got extra arc or void, depending on what element the armor was. Now, of course, you have armor and you still have void, arc, and solar armor. The difference is that how you masterwork and what you masterwork with and the number of levels have all changed. So previously we had mobility, resilience, and recovery, and that was on a 10-point scale, and now it is on a 100-point scale. So it goes, instead of from 1 to 10, it goes from, 1 to 100. But now you have a 6 attribute trait armor spec instead of a 3. So you still have mobility, resilience, recovery, but now you also have discipline, intellect, and strength. And each one is important for its own reason. Additionally, depending on what type of build you are building, if you're making a general build, you're not going to want any particular one to be less than, let's say, 30. 30 is kind of the lowest that you want any particular trait of the 6 trait stat. So theoretically, you would have more variety in the types of drops that you would get in Armor 2.0 because it would have certain amounts of each of these 6 attributes. So, strength here is 2, intellect is 6, discipline is 18, 6, 11, 7, for a total of 50. Now talking about attribute totals, we need to talk about the base attribute level. And when I'm talking about the base, I'm talking about a piece of armor that has no mods on it and it has not been masterworked. Okay, so back up a little bit. Masterworking an item used to give you resistance in that category. So this is a void armor piece, and in Armor 1.5 when you masterworked a piece of armor. Then you would get extra void resistance on a 5-point scale from enemy combatants. And then in the Crucible, when you activate your super, you would get an extra, like this has 2 energy, so that would be an extra 2% damage resistance while your super is active. That's no longer the case. Armor 2.0, the energy only talks about how much or how many mods that piece of armor can hold. So the more it's upgraded, the more it can hold in terms of mods. And mods go from anywhere from 1 all the way up to, say, 6 or 7. So looking at mods, you would naturally think that the higher the energy requirement, the more important it is. And that's not necessarily the case, but we'll come back to that. Just know that the only thing that the energy of the armor is only telling you how much and how many mods that you can put on there. Now, there's obviously a maximum number of mods that you can have. All right, so base level for your armor means that there are no mods on it and no masterworking. And why do I say that? Because putting a mod on your piece of armor will change it depending on what mod that you place. So this one says it is a total of 72, which is really good, but there is a mod on it, so it is not talking about the base attribute level. We take the mod off, and all of a sudden this goes down from 72 to 62. Well, because that mod all of a sudden added 10 points. And that's the way it works. In this first general mod slot, you have a lot of different mods. You have concussive, dampener, boss resist, major resist, minor resist, arc resist. Adding any of those will not change your attribute total. However, adding any of the ones in this top row, resilience, recovery, mobility, intellect, strength, and discipline, you notice over here on the right hand side, you have this green bar that changes between those different attributes. And that will add 10 points to your total. So adding that intellect mod back on there, it goes back up to 72. And then with masterworking a piece of armor, you can see these little orange bars here when you're at level 9 for a piece of armor like this one. And then you look to masterworking it, you see the little green bars on the right hand side. When you masterwork a piece of armor, you will add 2 points to each attribute. And that is true for all of them except for the class item, because the class item does not have any of those attributes tied to it. So masterworking adds 2 points or 12 points to the total, and depending on what you have in this general mod slot, you can add an additional 10 points. So if you're looking at a masterworked item, if you want to know what the base level is, you have to subtract 12. So 76 instead of 76, this would be 64. And then if you had a general mod that was one of these 6 attributes, you would have to subtract another 10. So comparing apples to apples, you can't compare a piece that is masterworked with a mod with a piece that is not masterwork. Say this one. This one has 50 total and that one has 76, and you say, why would I use the 50 when this one is so much higher? Well, you're not comparing apples to apples. Whereas if you're looking at this one and this one, these are comparable because the equipped helmet does not have an attribute mod on it, but these are both masterworked. So they both have the extra 12 points. And you can see there is a sizable difference between the two even there. So your attribute total is very, very important. The more attributes that you have, the more points and attributes you have, the higher your base stats are going to be. And then, of course, adding those extra perks are going to add to that total. Now, you can have a total of 600 points in between these 6 items: mobility, resilience, recovery, discipline, intellect, and strength. But the highest attribute total that I've ever seen, I believe, was 67. And multiplying that by 4, you're still quite a bit shy of 600 points. Now, there is an exception, and that is the leg armor. The leg armor is different because adding traction will add an additional 5 points to mobility. So if we go over here and look at one of these other ones, or just removing it, that will remove 5 points from mobility. The general mod that adds 10 points. So taking that one off will subtract 10 points. So if you're looking at leg armor with attraction mod, just know that you have to subtract more to get down to that base attribute level. So instead of 70, it would be 65 for that, and then 55 for after you take that one off. So this has a total of 55 instead of 70. And of course, if it was masterworked, you'd have to take off another 12. All right, so now we know about attributes. Which attribute is actually the most important, or which ones are the most important when you're getting drops for armor? If you had all drops that were the same level, so let's say they were all 65, you always got 65 attribute total for each one. Which of these are more important than others? And I will tell you that there are a couple that are more important, and not necessarily for the reason that you think. Actually, two. There are two of these attributes that are more important than the others. And when we're looking at the general mods, you might be able to guess right away. Now, looking at the mods, the energy requirement, which is in the top right corner of each of the mods, all of these are 3 except for 2. The recovery mod requires 4 energy, and the intellect mod requires 5 energy. So comparing 2 pieces of armor that are, I would say, within 5 points of each other. So if you have one that is really high, but you get one that is 5 points lower, but it is spec'd higher into recovery and or intellect, then that one is more than likely going to be more important than the one that has a few more points but less in those attributes. And that is because the amount of energy required to put those mods on to kind of fill in the gap is more expensive. This is taking 4 or 5, so 40 or 50% of the total possible energy when you could be using it for other mods, either seasonal mods or general mods that would help further your ambition in terms of power and what you can actually do. All right, now there's of course going to be exceptions to the rule. If you are building a specific mod, or you're building around a specific mod or a specific ability, then of course that ability or that attribute is going to be more important to you for that build than others. So if you're building a melee Titan build, then strength will be your most important attribute. As such, you will want to maximize that strength as close to 100 as possible to reduce that cooldown of the melee ability. So depending on your build, what attribute you value the most will change, but in general, intellect and recovery are the more important traits to have. Recovery, of course, brings back your health faster. Intellect brings your super back faster so you can use it more often. And who wouldn't like to use their super more often? Exactly. So important to have both of these things. And like I said, if you're going to build a melee build or a grenade build, then those are going to be more important than others. If you're building a mobility build, then that will be more important. All right. So not only do we have the traits, but we have the mods. Well, you say, well, the mods, you can do whatever you want since you can put whatever mod will help you the most, right? Well, not exactly, because not only do you have these traits and mods, but you have mods with elemental affinity. So depending on whether you have an arc, solar, or void piece of armor, that will change the mods that you have available for that piece of armor. So, for example, the armor piece, the general armor mod, that will always be the same with this exception. Void resistance, arc resistance, solar resistance, of course, matches whatever energy you have. Going to the next one, however, this is where it really starts to become apparent. So, in the top left corner of these mods, you'll see an element or no element. So this one has void, this one is blank, so this is generic. So primary, special, heavy ammo finders, those are all generic, as well as scatter, projectile, and precision weapon targeting. So those will be on all 3 elements. However, grenade launcher ammo finder, hand cannon ammo finder, sniper rifle, sidearm, and scout rifle ammo finder will only be on void helmet pieces. And then, of course, targeting with a couple of enhanced versions as well for those same weapons. Looking at solar, you can see the same general mods, but then we have auto rifle, fusion rifle, submachine gun, rocket launcher, and linear fusion, ammo finder, and targeting. And then for arc, of course, we have the same general mods, but then we have bow, machine gun, sword, shotgun, and pulse rifle, ammo finder, and targeting as well. So depending on what weapons you're planning on using, that may predicate which armor you're going to use with that weapon. So if you have a solar piece of armor and a void piece of armor, even though maybe one isn't quite as good as the other one, you might use the solar armor because you want to use a fusion rifle. And then, of course, the other armor pieces are going to be the same, except the perks will be, of course, different. It'll be loader for the arm piece. For the chest piece, you're looking at reserves and unflinching. And of course, you'll have some enhanced versions as well. Leg armor, like I said, there's that traction, and then you have dexterity for those weapons, and then scavenger. The class item is a little bit different when you're looking at the perks. Now you do have extra super based on those weapons for that element, but then you have things like healthy finisher, bulwark finisher, better already, insulation, perpetuation, and dynamo. For void. For solar, we're looking at recuperation, innervation, bomber, enhanced versions, of course, ashes to assets, and then of course extra super energy on fusion rifle and rocket launcher final blows. And finally, arc, which has invigoration, outreach, 1-2 finisher, explosive finisher, hands-on, and then pump action, storm of lead, and bleeding edge, which gives you extra super for those final blows. And of course, looking at, you have the, I don't know, what is that, greenish blue teal ones, which are from the artifact, and those change every couple months. So in addition to having the traits, you also have elemental affinities, which are paired with certain weapons, and that would make you think that you are required to use certain weapons with certain armor types. So if you are using a void set of armor, then you might need to look at running grenade launcher, hand cannon, sniper, sidearm, and or scout rifle in that combination, because that is the most efficient use of your armor's energy capacity. And then the same thing with the other ones, just different weapons. Now, in addition to that, you will have different seasonal slots for armor. Now, the current Season of Dawn, we have these Charge of Light mods, which have different ways of gaining and using charges of light. So extra weapon damage or extra damage resistance when you lose your shield when you're charged with light, gain extra stack for every stack you get. Now these have negative effects to your stat total. Not so great. And of course these also have elemental affinity. So depending on whether you have Void, Arc, Solar will also change what mods you can put on there. So going back to the Season of Undying, we have the Undying mod slot, which gives you Nightmare mods. So when you're doing Nightmare hunts, that gives you extra damage or resistance or whatever against nightmares. So this one gives you extra damage from melee and grenade abilities against nightmare bosses. That reduces your damage. And then looking at, different elements have different mods, of course. Supers do more damage. You do more damage to solar shields, etc. Now looking also at other armor, because other armor, of course, is important. We have Notorious armor, and 4 different versions of that. And of course, when you're playing Gambit Prime, you'll want to have this type of armor because that gives you extra perks. And who wouldn't want a little bit of an edge while you're playing Gambit Prime? Everyone. So there's that Collector, Sentry, Reaper, and Invader set for Gambit Prime. So when you're playing Gambit Prime, then of course you'll want to do that. And then looking at either the Exodus Down or Opulent armor, those have a mod slot for the Opulent mods, which you get from playing the Menagerie. And these mods affect how you play anywhere in the Leviathan. So anywhere on the Leviathan, you will have perks on that. So that includes the Menagerie, but it also includes any of the raids, including Crown of Sorrows. So Leviathan Raid, Spire of Stars, Eater of Worlds. So doing any of those activities, you will likely want to have that Exodus Down or Opulent set that will help you out in those cases. So not only will you need to have Void, Solar, and Arc, but you'll also need different seasons for the different mods, and you'll also need attributes. You'll need your highest level of attributes that you can, and weapons that correspond with the elemental affinity of that armor. So it is very much more in depth than armor used to be, because before you just pick up some armor and you say, okay, what perks does it have on it? Can I use it? Do I like it? And if you liked the perks and if you liked the mods that were already on it, then you say, okay, good. It's got rocket reserves. I like using rockets. Oh, it's got enhanced sniper rifle targeting. That's great. And it's got extra resilience. That's awesome because I like having extra resilience. So it was a take it or leave it kind of thing. So you would go and look at it, and maybe it was more powerful, but it didn't have the perks that you wanted, so you could infuse it into your old armor and bump that up. Now you can still infuse armor, of course. Now it will either require Glimmer or upgrade modules, depending on whether it is the same piece of armor or a different piece of armor. Additionally, looking at upgrading your total energy, so you can put more mods and more useful mods on your armor. You're starting off with Glimmer and Legendary Shards. It moves on from there. Let me see if I have one that's around. There we go. It moves on to Enhancement Cores, and then from Enhancement Cores, it moves on to Enhancement Prisms. So not only do you need Legendary Shards and Glimmer, but you also need Enhancement Prisms. And then once you get up to energy level 9, in order to get it to 10, you will need an Ascendant Shard. Now currently the only way to get Ascendant Shards is to turn in 10 Prisms to Banshee along with 50,000 Glimmer and some resources, planetary resources, or you get a lucky drop from the Master Nightfall. So right now it's very difficult to get. Now there are usually about 3 Ascendant Shards that you can get just by the season pass. You see, you get a couple shards, especially towards the end of the season pass. So in conclusion, when you're building a build, you're going to go and look for the highest attribute total first, and then you're going to look at your elemental affinity second, to pair it with the weapons that you're going to want to use. And then third, you're going to look at the seasonal mod slot that will help you out with certain activities, either current or previous activities, whether it is Gambit Prime, Leviathan Raid, Menagerie, Garden of Salvation, or what have you, or whatever the current seasonal activity is. Now the current season, Season of Dawn mod slot seems to be more of a general mod slot versus a specific mod slot. So instead of being specified for the sundial in particular, it is just general mods that will help you out anywhere. So kind of a catch-22, but again, a lot of these mods will subtract from your total, so it is important to keep that in mind. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check us out on social media, and thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And we'll see you next time.